What's up, everybody? Sam Benger here. Welcome back, and for our first-time listeners, welcome to the Game Plan T1D Podcast. For today's episode, I was lucky enough to be able to sit down with junior freestyle kayak world champ and Olympic hopeful Sage Donnelly. We covered a number of important and fascinating topics during our talk today, and I'm excited to share it with you. Before we get started, I just wanted to highlight we have a new I Have a Game Plan blog series which highlights athletes of all levels and is another fantastic spotlight on T1D All-Stars who are just crushing it right now. These articles are written by the athletes themselves, so it gives an authentic look into their life with diabetes. Go give the articles a look on the Game Plan T1D website sometime soon. So, without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Sage Donnelly. Sweet. All right. Well, with that, welcome to the Game Plan T1D Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Benger. We have a great conversation coming up today that I'm super excited for. With us on the show today, we have Sage Donnelly. Sage, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing fantastic. So for our audience members who haven't done a little bit of background research on you, like I have, kind of talk to us about just what your background is as a diabetic athlete.
Well, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 3 years old, which was the same age as my grandpa, so we kind of saw it coming a little bit. And then I started whitewater kayaking in a two-person boat with my dad when I was 2 and started running rivers in my own boat when I was 5. So I was kind of raised doing that as well. And I've just been super outdoorsy my whole life. I started rock climbing before I can remember, skiing. And then when I was 7, I started competing in kayaking and kind of decided to switch more towards that. And now that's pretty much all I do.
Yeah. If you guys want to be just blown away by a diabetic athlete who is crushing it right now, go check out Sage's Instagram, and she has some just crazy stuff posted on there. I was looking through there briefly before we got on the call, and you had a particular run, I think in North Carolina, posted where it's just this, looks like a 10 or 15 foot drop where you're going through on a kayak.
Yeah, that's
and I
the
can't
Green
even,
River.
I guess to get to that point, you got to start young to be able to be okay with drops like that. But talk to us a little bit about getting started. I was reading on your site that not only are you an avid kayaker, but you also do stand-up paddleboarding, rock climbing. You were skiing double diamonds at the age of 5, apparently. Was this, do you think, a result of your family saying, okay, you were diagnosed at age 3, we want to make sure you're active, and that's going to be sort of an effort to combat the diabetes, or was it just naturally something that you were really passionate about and that your family was really passionate about?
Well, honestly, I think it was more of like, we're not going to let diabetes stop us from being active. Because we've just been, my parents were super active. They actually met rock climbing, learned how to kayak for their honeymoon. So they've been super active their whole life as well. And then they just kind of were raising me, just doing that like they were. And then that was kind of thrown at us, and we just rolled with it. I mean, I don't obviously remember very much of it at first because I was 3, but we just rolled with it and kind of made it work and just kept being active and doing what we loved.
Mm-hmm. And Sage, talk about doing skiing, doing rock climbing, doing these different things. How was it that kayaking kind of became your central focus and main passion going forward as an athlete?
Oh, that's a hard question. I'm not really sure. I mean, I just kind of fell in love with it. Like I said, I started at a super young age, and there's just this amazing feeling you get from going down, when I was younger, I wasn't doing super hard stuff, but just going down a river, going over waves, and my family made it always like a family event. Like when I was super young up in Reno, my dad and I would go up just by ourselves. We would actually bike our own shuttle. So we would leave the car at the bottom of the river run, and then he would run and I would bike up to the top where our gear was waiting. We'd lock the bike up, and then we'd paddle down and drive back up to get it. So it was always just super fun and just something I always really looked forward to. And then at one point it was like, Dad, I want to learn how to roll my boat back upright. That was when I was about 6, turning 7. And then after that, I was like, well, I can roll now, so I might as well start competing pretty much because I'd always wanted to do it. Like, we had gone to Colorado for a couple of years in a row, just watching the competitions there and then doing our own just fun kayaking. I was also chosen, used to be a system for the Reno River Festival where you would paddle with the pros. So they would select like 4 people to paddle with some pro kayakers and kind of learn how to kayak better, and they'd compete in the Reno River Festival. So I was selected for that. I think that was actually my first freestyle competition. So that's like pretty much gymnastics in the water while we're surfing a wave.
Wow. Yeah.
And after that, it just kind of took off. I was like, man, I really like competing. I love doing this. Like, I want to learn how to front flip. And then I just kept wanting to learn more and more. And here I am.
That's amazing. Yeah. So try to level with our audience for a second here, because my only experience kayaking outside of on like a very still body of water is I tried to take my kayak out in the ocean one time when I was like 12 and it flipped and hit me in the head and I was crying. So was there any ever fear when you were getting started? You know, we talked about these like massive drops that you're doing and stuff like that. Was there any ever fear in getting started or trepidation, or was it always like bring on the next class of like rapid?
Definitely a lot of fear. My dad has worked with me through so much of just like standing at the top of a rapid looking at it and just being super scared, because I mean there are consequences of course to everything, but one of our rules was, or my parents' rules, is they never put me on something that I didn't have the skills for. So I was always like ahead in my skill level. Like I knew I could do it, but it also was scary because, you know, if you do mess it up, there could be consequences, but it was always a super safe environment. We always set safety. My dad would actually break it down for me. So if it was like a rapid, we'd break it into like sections. Be like, okay, so what's the worst thing that's going to happen here? Well, I'll flip. And what's going to happen? Oh, I'll roll up. And then after that, when you kind of realize, okay, that's the worst that can happen, it got a lot easier. And then I'd eventually just like, okay, I'm running it. And I'd go. But I mean, there was definitely a lot of standing around, talking about it, being scared, and working through it, of course. But I mean, I still get scared. Like, I run some big rapids, and the bigger they are, the more consequences there are. And you just kind of have to either go, okay, I want to run this, or, you know what, maybe today's not my day. And I mean, it's just picking your paddles and deciding if you're feeling it or not. And if you're not feeling it, it's okay to not do it, of course. But, I mean, I usually end up doing it just because it's so fun and I want to. But, yeah.
Yeah, the exhilaration trumps the fear. But I actually just about a week ago watched this awesome video where this little girl, she must not have been older than like 8 or 10, did this massive downhill ski jump. So it shows her at the top and she's like, all right, here we go. And it was her first time doing it. They bumped up like from a 20-foot jump to like a 40-foot jump. And it's kind of that same thing where it's like, if you can be realistic about what's the worst that can actually happen. She's like, it's just like, and the video shows her talking to herself before she goes. She's like, it's just like a 20-foot jump, but just a little bit longer. So it's really about how you frame the challenge that you're going into. And I think this is really the perfect segue into talking about your diabetes diagnosis. And we've talked about you getting started with kayaking and competing in that. Talk to us about how you were getting started as a competitor, but at the same time managing that additional burden of being a diabetic.
Yeah, so my parents kind of raised me after I was diagnosed to kind of just not really treat it as a burden, but just treat it as part of life. And that's the mentality I try to keep still to this day. And I mean, it does get hard, obviously. Like, I'll have training sessions where I get super low and I won't be able to move pretty much and I'll have to stop, which is super frustrating and stuff like that. But I mean, I've always just kind of thought of it as something that just makes me stronger, and I've never let it stop me from reaching my goals. So, I mean, we just take extra precautions, obviously. Like, we always have juice around when I'm training or competing. We're constantly checking my blood sugar. I have a CGM, so we're always looking at that and making sure the numbers are correct. And I mean, it's a lot of preparation, but like I said, it's just part of my life, and I don't like to think of it as a burden.
I really think that's the correct frame of mind and mindset to approach type 1 diabetes with, So I just turned 23, just graduated college, and I think I'm just now starting to appreciate how diabetes can be advantageous from not only mental resilience and strength standpoint, but, being part of the larger T1D community as well, I think has benefits. But it sounds like you've, from a young age, been raised to look at your diabetes as something that makes you stronger. Was that always the case? And talk about how you were able to kind of reframe or frame from the start your diabetes in a positive light.
Well, I mean, I think it was honestly kind of easier for me to frame it in a positive light because I was diagnosed so young. So my parents instantly were just like, okay, this is good. We're fine. We've got this. And just like constantly building me up. And so, like I said, I don't really remember a whole lot when I was diagnosed. I just remember the needles. But I mean, that's just kind of always the mentality we've taken. And I mean, when you're diagnosed so young, it's a lot easier to do that. But I mean, even to this day, I still have like hard times. It's definitely a really bad feeling to have to stop a training session, especially in slalom whitewater kayaking, which is the sport I'm trying to go for in the 2020 Olympics. We only have 1 hour training slot allotted to us. So if you get low in one of those, it's pretty much your training session's done. And I mean, I've had a few breakdowns during that when I get low and I have to stop and eat and drink, and it's not a great feeling, but you kind of just have to take a step back and go like, I'm still training and working my butt off with this disease, and I'm not letting it stop me, and that automatically just makes me 10 times better than a normal person just doing this. So you kind of have to, it sounds really arrogant, but you kind of have to build yourself up a little bit, Oh,
absolutely. And I understand where you're coming from with the frustration. And my senior year, our training staff, and I played college football, but if I was below 80 during a game, I would have to sit out 15 minutes. And there's only 60 minutes in a football game, and, you're like, man, I just want to get back out there. But at the same time, it's ultimately for our safety.
Exactly.
But similar to you, Sage, I was diagnosed when I was 5 years old. So I do remember the syringes as well and the shots, but I didn't know anything other than being a diabetic growing up. And I think that was definitely advantageous because I was just focused. It was, this is life for me. But type 1 diabetes, the average age of diagnosis, I've heard recently, is 14 years old. So I think both of us have learned just by growing up, and as a result of the age of our diagnosis, we can, appreciate how we're better for having diabetes. But for someone that's diagnosed at that average age, say 14, 15 years old, do you have any tips for them, Sage, on how they can work to appreciate diabetes and not look at it as a burden?
I mean, it's definitely hard, but try to be consistent in just correcting your mindset. Like every time you're like, oh, I can't do this because of my diabetes, just say, no, you know what? I can do this. If I prepare correctly and I set things up correctly, I can do this. And, sometimes it won't work out. Sometimes you'll go too low. Sometimes you'll go too high. When it gets to that point, you just have to take a deep breath and say, you know what? I am doing what I love, and just because I have this disease doesn't mean that it's going to stop me. You just got to kind of roll with it and just do your best, and there's going to be times where it feels awful and your body wants to just stop, but you just have to push through it. Like I said, just really being consistent and just not letting it stop you and trying to keep as positive as you can.
I definitely agree with that, and I think when we're talking about framing your diabetes, it's not just like this flip that switches. And I think that might be a misconception that some people have. And they're like, well, I just can't flip that switch and appreciate what I'm dealing with, the highs and lows that come with diabetes. But I think for me, it's really about small victories. And I actually just read a book recently. It's called Bright Spots and Landmines by Adam Brown. And he's a diabetic, and he talks about different small actionable steps that people can take to frame their diabetes in a positive light. And one of the big things he talks about is numbers. And I think numbers can be an emotional touch point where if you're not on a CGM and you're doing finger sticks and you check and you're like, I was feeling good, but I was 250. And then you're like, oh man, 250, what did I do to mess this up? What is this doing for my long-term health? And you can kind of spiral down. But what Adam talks about in his book is just take a number for what it is. If you're 250, correct to bring yourself down into range. And don't attach any emotional baggage to that number. Is that something that sort of resonates with you?
That definitely resonates with me. That's a really good idea, actually. I kind of do that by not realizing it. But now that you say that, that actually is really smart. And yeah, I mean, it is hard to do that, of course, but my whole way that I try to take any part of my mental side, if it's diabetes or competing, is just consistency. Like consistently reminding yourself to be positive. And that's a big thing that I have to do in my life, but I'm getting better at it. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely, I think even for us, there are days when you struggle, obviously, and it's not all good, it's not all bad, but it's a process, like you said, and as long as you can be consistent and kind of ring the bell and show up every day to that, and kind of face up to your diabetes, then you're absolutely on the right path. But I wanted to talk to you about your sort of current schedule. I was looking again at your Instagram, and you're in Poland recently, you're in Slovakia, you're traveling all around the world. Tell us a little bit about your current training schedule, and also maybe we can dive into how you manage your diabetes with so much travel.
Yeah, so this is actually my 17th day home this year of 2018. Wow. I started in December 31st. I was 2 months in New Zealand and Australia for winter training, and then I was home for 6 days, got in my car with my dog, drove out to North Carolina, was there for about 2 months, and then drove to Georgia for like a week, and then drove to Colorado for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And then right after that, I didn't even go home. It was straight from the car. We parked my car at my friend's house, onto a plane to Europe, where I've been for the last 3 months, competing pretty much every weekend.
Holy cow. So,
so that was
for our audience,
mid-June.
where is home base for you?
Carson City, Nevada.
Okay.
It's near Lake Tahoe, Reno.
So you're flying every which way out of Nevada, New Zealand, you said.
Yeah.
Because I've always found for me when I travel, especially flying and, you're around different environments, different foods, that can complicate maintaining a stable level of blood sugar. What do you do to try to maintain that? I'm sure you have a system with, like you said, only being home 17 days a year.
Yeah.
You are the definition of a jet setter at this point. So how do you go about maintaining a good level of blood sugar and maintaining your diabetes?
Well, when I am stuck in a car for 5 days or on a plane for 16 hours, it's honestly just a lot of insulin. Like I have to pump up my basals. Well, now I'm on a Medtronic continuous, it's a closed loop system, so I don't pump up my basals. But if I like back in the day, I only got on this year, I used to have to pump up my basals sometimes, usually 20%, but sometimes even 50%. And then bolusing, you have to bolus. When you eat food, you have to bolus like extra early. Like I would be bolusing 30 minutes early before I could eat, just trying not to get my blood sugars high, because I am so active. Whenever I'm not working out, my blood sugars just go crazy. So yeah, so just a lot of insulin and a lot of pre-planning for traveling. And then it is hard, especially like going to Europe and to Australia and stuff, with different foods. But over the years, you kind of get used to guessing carbs and everything. And, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. You just kind of have to roll with it and go, oh, next time I eat that food, I probably should give more insulin or maybe less. And it's just kind of a guessing game almost. But, you make it work. Yeah.
It's funny. I think one of the things I get most criticized for by my endocrinologist is the fact that I don't have a set carb ratio. I kind of just eyeball things, and she's always disgusted by that. She's like, wow, you need to have a carb ratio, and no wonder you have a couple lows here in the morning. And I'm like, well, I've had this thing for 18 years. I'm pretty good at eyeballing the amount of carbs on my plate, but it sounds like you're doing that a little bit as well too.
Definitely. Yeah, my endo always gets mad at me for not actually using the Bolus Wizard, where it does all the math for you. Because I'm like, I'm good at math. I just want to do it.
Yeah, diabetes makes you fantastic at math, so that's the silver lining that we're going for. But so in all of these different places, you're doing different runs in these different countries. Talk about what is the process like, kind of scouting out a location. And I imagine, a run in New Zealand versus a run in Poland or Slovakia, those are, I would imagine, vastly different. How do you try to maintain a consistent level of performance across those different environments?
Well, it's pretty tricky. So I'm actually doing pretty much all of this travel for slalom. So let me just give you a little breakdown of it. It's like skiing slalom. We have gates we have to go in between, but some of gates are down gates, some of them are up, and you get in trouble, and you have 2 seconds added onto your time if you touch them, and 50 seconds if you miss them. So you're trying to be clean in between the gates, but also fast. So it's very on the edge, hard sport, and our courses last about 1:30 of just sprinting as hard as you can.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. So I've done most of my traveling for that, and pretty much all of our courses nowadays are artificial, so they're man-made. Most of them in Europe are diverted off of a river, but they're all like concrete. Some of the new ones, actually, they just build a big circular ditch pretty much. They put pumps at the bottom, and the water gets pumped in a circle, like full circle. So it's not like super hard whitewater. It's more technical whitewater. Like, you're not going to see any big, scary, like, consequential things, but you're still going to have a hard time paddling. So it's kind of like a different thing than just going down a river, you know? But I mean, every course is different, which is the cool thing about it. Some courses are more similar to others, but pretty much every time you're on a different piece of water, which is amazing and super fun, but also can be pretty tricky.
Oh, absolutely. I can't imagine. So you said that the average run is somewhere between a minute and a half. Do you have multiple runs to qualify, or is it usually like one and done? If you don't make the time, you're out.
So basically, you get 2 runs the first day. So you have probably like 60 athletes. The first run, they take the top 20. And then the second run, if you don't make top 20, you have the chance to make the next top 10. So they take 30 total. And if you don't make the top 10, then you're done. And then the next day you have semifinals, so you get 1 run. Top 10 from that part goes to finals, and then if you don't make the top 10, you're done. So it's pretty brutal. No second chances.
Pretty brutal indeed, it sounds like. So do you have, it's sort of, I would equate this or make an analogy to like an Olympic sprinter. You know, you do all of this training, all of this visualization, then it's when the light goes on or the gun sounds, you have such a limited amount of time to actually go out and perform and execute on this strategy. Do you have any sort of approach or routine that you do prior to kind of getting behind the starting line to one of these events?
I mean, I definitely have a set routine, but I've had a bit of a hard time with it this year as far as competitions. I haven't put down a ton of good ones, but that's more on my mental side that I'm trying to work on. But normally it's like 2 hours before because you have set times, 2 hours before my run, I'll do a pre-warm-up, which is like just easy paddling with a couple sprints, and then I'll get out, walk the course with my coach, look at the water, just kind of get centered. And then about 15 minutes before my run, I'll get back in just to warm up again, and then it's go time. And there's a lot of music put into that.
Okay. What are we listening to?
Lots of different stuff, some rock, some punk, some rap. Just kind of depends on what mood I'm in.
Do you have a go-to song?
Ooh, that's hard. I don't know. It kind of changes, honestly. Like, it changes per competition, depends on what mood I'm in. Sometimes it's like more upbeat and fun. Sometimes it's just like getting super pumped up and like stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I definitely know what you mean. Depends on the day. And I actually, before football games, there was a stretch where I get so much adrenaline I did. I'm washed up now. I'm retired, but I would get so much of an adrenaline rush before games that I would actually have to try the opposite approach, and I would actually listen to music that tried to calm me down. So I would listen to like mellow Coldplay songs and try to relax before I went out on the field. So, and that's another thing I wanted to talk about as it relates to diabetes and especially these shorter events. I imagine there's obviously got to be a lot of adrenaline and excitement flowing through your body. So, and we know scientifically that cortisol will affect blood sugar levels and elevate your blood sugar. Is that a phenomenon that you've noticed, and do you have any strategies to kind of counteract that?
I definitely have noticed it. Even during training, actually, I'll be like 120 when I'll be okay, perfect. And then I'll just spike up to 250 for absolutely no reason. I'll have like not eaten anything. I'll just spike up. So that's definitely from adrenaline and just, all that. So I try to give myself like a little bolus when I get off to kind of try to counteract that. It's still not super perfect, but it's worked better.
Yeah.
And then, I try to do that after races as well. During slalom, it's not too bad. I get spikes after training more often than I get spikes after races. But during the creek races, which is going from point A to point B as fast as you can over super hard whitewater, like almost the hardest whitewater you can have, my blood sugars go crazy after that because that is like pure adrenaline. You're running over waterfalls and going through just massive whitewater. So
yeah, that makes sense. It's almost like with the slalom, you have to be a little bit more calculated and calm in terms of navigating the different gates. So talking about your competing, I'm looking at your resume here. 2013 Junior Women's National Freestyle Champion. 2014, you followed it up with being named Canoe and Kayak Female Paddler of the Year. And then in 2015, Junior Women's Freestyle World Champion. Is there a particular run or event or win that sticks out in your mind as a moment that for you is you have the most pride about?
It would probably definitely have to be my 2015 Freestyle Junior World Championships. It was on a wave versus a hole, so they're a lot harder to put a whole ride in because you can flush off a lot easier. And they're also different tricks. And I had never wave boated before in my life. I made team, and I went up to Canada and just put a ton of work in. I was paddling like 3 times a day, just trying to learn the tricks to do on those waves, having no idea what I'm doing. And my dad and I worked through it, and I put down my whole competition ride that I wanted to, and my score actually outscored the women, and it was an amazing feeling. That's one of my favorite competitions for sure.
That's amazing. And when you say tricks, describe that to me, because I'm like envisioning you doing like a flip off of a jump in a kayak, but I don't know if that's even remotely accurate.
So picture like a surf wave in the ocean, but make it stationary. And we are actually in our kayaks going up and down the wave and throwing like, it's easier to describe it in a hole where we do front flips and stuff, but wave tricks they use a lot of ends. So we'll do like, it sounds awful, someone named a trick a blunt.
Okay.
And we'll do blunt, so it's like just like a cartwheel pretty much, but only the first end of it, and you can do that backwards. And we do, my signature trick was 360 on my head pretty much, like using my paddle blades to spin me around. So you're upside down doing a 360, and that's called a helix.
The old helix. Okay.
Yes.
You're inverted at this point, and you're completely underwater.
Yes. Well, you try to get air on it.
Okay.
So that's the goal of the trick. You can't actually score it unless you have air, but you definitely can't breathe. It's not enough air for that.
Wow. And is it always in these are you training in the same environment that you're competing in, or are you training in a more controlled environment to kind of learn these tricks?
So basically, for a competition like World Championships, I always go there at least a month before to the exact venue where the competition will be, just to figure out where I can throw tricks, how I can set up, what works in different places, and kind of figuring out my competition ride and also working on new tricks. So that's kind of what I do. So yeah, I'm in the competition venue for a while, but sometimes it depends. Sometimes like for smaller competitions, we'll just show up like the week before, but you always get at least some kind of training at the competition venue. But for slalom, actually, we set gates for training, but we actually have no idea what the course will be for the competition until the night before the race. And then we don't get to practice on it at all. We get to watch some paddlers who aren't racing navigate it and kind of figure out what to do off of that. But the first time we're touching the course is on our race run. So that makes it even harder.
Wow. Yeah, the unknown. So does any of your training happen outside of these courses, or is it primarily you're in the boat where you're going down a course and that's where most of the training happens? Are you doing, strength training or plyometrics or anything like that outside of the water?
Yes. So during winter, I'm actually working out about 3 times a day. So I'll do flat water, which can go from anaerobic to aerobic. We'll either do like shorter sprints for a longer period of time, or we'll do 7 minutes at our heart rate at 170 and then take a little break, and we'll do that like 10 times. So it's really working on trying to build up how fast you can go for that minute 30. And then I'll do a gym session, which can range from, we'll do like, usually during the winter it's faster stuff, so we'll do a lot of circuits, which can be like pull-ups, bench press, kind of everything you can think of, squats, deadlifts, lots of burpees, and just, kind of stuff like that. Pretty basic workout. We don't do anything super fancy, but it's like at a super high intensity, a lot higher reps, a lighter weight. And then getting towards more of the end of winter training, we'll do like less reps with heavier weights and stuff like that. And then I'll also do like another either technique session or recovery paddle, which is like 30 minutes of easy paddling, or just usually more of a aerobic type session to finish off the day, which could also involve a run. So yeah, I'm constantly training.
Definitely sounds like that's awesome. So what sort of community do you have, and do you have a community that you sort of train with, and what does that kind of support network look like?
So I actually do a lot of my training on my own because I live in Nevada, and the closest slalom group to me is in North Carolina. There's a little one in Colorado, but they don't have a good course either. So I do pretty much all my stuff on my own. I have a remote coach who lives in Spain, and he'll send me training plans when I'm home, and I'll send him video back, and he kind of will Skype me and help me with my technique. But yeah, I have no training partner out here or anything. And in the summer when I'm training, I usually use a different coach than the rest of the U.S. team, so I'm still kind of training on my own normally. So I don't really mind it. But actually this winter, in about a month, I'm probably heading out to Spain to train with the coach who sends me training plans. So I'll have some buddies out there to paddle with, which will be nice.
Amazing. Yeah, I think as someone who's trained alone a little bit for college football, I think it's tough. I definitely think there are advantages to being part of a group, but at the same time, training alone, I think, is a great tool to kind of sharpen mental toughness. Would you agree?
Oh, yes, I definitely agree. It definitely is not super motivating, or I don't get super motivated sometimes to go out in the cold all by myself, but it helps with that, and I think it also helps with diabetes, and training like that kind of help each other as far as the mental side of just toughening up and going out and doing it.
So we talked about, I know you mentioned the 2020 Olympics briefly, and I wanted to get your take on what are some of your goals moving forward as an athlete, as a competitor, and what do you sort of have your sights set on moving forward?
My main goal right now is the 2020 Olympics. This is the first year where they'll have canoe women's in it. So we've had canoe men's, kayak men's, and kayak women's. But this year is the first year where they're adding canoe women's, which is my favorite. So I really want to go for that. And then I would also love to go for kayak because I do both. Yeah, so that's my main goal that I'm working towards right now. My first qualification race was World Championships in 2019, which are in Spain. So I'm getting ready for that. I also freestyle. So next year I have World Championships, which is my first year as women's. So I'd really love to medal at that. And yeah, just keep improving and paddling and having fun, of course.
Absolutely, having fun. Most important part. What would it mean to you to not only represent the U.S. in the Olympics, but also sort of the diabetic athlete community?
It would be incredible, honestly. You don't see, at least I haven't seen a lot of media of diabetic Olympians. So I would love to represent the community and hopefully help inspire other diabetics to follow their dreams. And I mean, of course, representing my country in the Olympics has been my dream since I was 7. So it would be pretty incredible.
We're wishing you the best. But what other, I saw on your Instagram as well, I think you were doing a shoot for perhaps Medtronic. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what do you feel is the importance of advocacy on the behalf of diabetic athletes and kind of using their platform to try to be an inspiration to other people living with diabetes?
Honestly, I think it's huge, and I probably haven't been the best at advocating for diabetes, but I've decided to start getting better at that. I have had a lot of people contact me asking I didn't know you were diabetic. What do you do for competitions and stuff? So I definitely want to put more stuff out there to help other diabetics. And I've also, this year especially, had a lot of very ignorant people try to talk to me about diabetes. So I want to also help the general public kind of try to understand what we go through.
when you say ignorant, just to clarify, is that like they don't know the difference between type 2 and type 1, or is it,
Usually,
what does that look like?
well, I had a mother say that diabetes was just like having dyslexia. So kind of stuff like that, where they have just no idea what they're talking about. I've had people ask, oh, why are you wearing your insulin pump all day? And, just like crazy stuff like that, where it's like, well, I need it to live.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people don't understand diabetes. They don't even know what it is. And I think that having some more people know and understand would also really help other diabetics with a support group and everything.
For sure. I think all diabetics, regardless of whether you're a successful athlete or not, have a platform and they have the ability to impact other individuals. Maybe it's just one person, maybe it's 100 people or 1,000.
Oh, definitely.
But, as a result of diabetes being sort of an invisible chronic illness, you can go through your life and through your sort of diabetic journey and not kind of let anyone in on what's going on. And I've said this before on the podcast, and I'll repeat it because I think it's important. I was, in my senior year doing injections. I was on a pen at that point. I'm now back on a pump. But doing injections in the locker room, and guys were coming up to me that I played 4 years of football with and asking, what that was. I think it's important to be proactive about advocating our diabetes and being demonstrative with your treatment, because the simple fact is, we are so desensitized because we live with it. We're around it 24/7. But the truth is, like you experienced, Sage, a lot of people don't actually know about it. And by just being a little bit more vocal in our treatment, we can really impact people, really educate people, and hopefully in the end state, really inspire a lot of people, and people especially living with diabetes.
Oh, yes, definitely. And I always try to answer everyone's questions, especially in person, but I definitely want to get more on the bandwagon of just posting stuff about diabetes on social media and all that.
So in those 17 days that you're home out of the year, what do you do to kind of remove yourself from all the stresses that come with competing, and kind of what do you do outside of the boat? What are sort of your hobbies to kind of detach from that?
Well, honestly, right now I'm swamped with college, so I do online classes through Western Nevada College. So right now it's just a lot of school. But, I love to go on hikes with my dog. I have a little Rhodesian Ridgeback, and he's just the cutest, and we'll go out for hours and just hike, and it's great. And I live near Lake Tahoe, so we have amazing mountains. And, I love to longboard, hike, run, just kind of anything outdoors I just love, like stand-up paddleboarding. Just going for a river run is just amazing because, you're out in nature. You can see beautiful things. You're with your friends. And, it's a lovely step back from training, even though I'm still kayaking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just do a lot of outdoor stuff. I read when I can,
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't happen very often. I'm pretty busy.
Yeah, no, it certainly sounds like it. And I think I'm now appreciating the value of nature and just being out, exposed to it, going for hikes. I just did after I graduated school, a big road trip in the Southwest. So we did Arches, Grand Canyon, Bryce, Canyonlands, Zion, and just being out and around nature just kind of rewires your brain. And I think it's just so awesome. And it's tough I'm based in Boston, so we have a shorter window to go out and do those hikes and things like that. But, and outside of it just being good for your state of being, I think for diabetes, I think it can introduce a lot of stability to your blood sugar by just going out. If you do a 2-hour hike, you'll be shocked at the rest of the day how stable your blood sugars can be.
Definitely.
But yeah, Sage, so in starting to wrap up, what are some of the other things that you think about with regard to your diabetes, and what would be some of your messages to the broader T1D community?
Since I was diagnosed, I've always been trying to push out. Just because you have diabetes doesn't mean you have to give up on your goals and dreams. I've met a lot of diabetics, like even at my endocrinologist, that were like, oh, yeah, I used to play soccer, but I have diabetes now, so I can't. And I just really want to push out that that's not the case. You can follow your goals. You can follow your dreams. It'll be harder, obviously, than not having it, but it'll actually make you stronger in the end, and you can be an amazing athlete or whatever else you want to do.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that's the thing. And if you can embrace that and believe that diabetes won't hold you back, I think in the end you'll actually find that the disease empowers you to do things from a mental standpoint and just from an overall resiliency standpoint that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do.
Definitely.
And that's a realization that will come at different points for different people. And I think we were both, in a sense, fortunate to be diagnosed at a young age and have sort of had a longer run time with diabetes so that we could have that sort of epiphany. But it is really, and I'm coming to the realization that T1D is a blessing in disguise if you manage it properly, if you keep your blood sugar under control. So yeah, couldn't agree with you more in terms of it is absolutely not a roadblock to athletic success or success otherwise or living a gratifying and happy life. So Sage, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was fascinating. It makes me want to go out and kayak. I don't know where, but hopefully I will have a better experience than when I was 12 and the kayak flipped and hit me on the head. Again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And it was an awesome conversation. We'll be pulling for you to make the 2020 Olympics, and best of luck in moving forward with your career as a competitive athlete.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. And if you ever find yourself in Nevada, if I'm home, I'll take you kayaking.
I know. I guess we just got to hope for that. It's one of those 17 days that you're back.
Definitely. I am Sage Donnelly. I have type 1 diabetes, and I have a game plan.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Game Plan T1D podcast. For related content, please visit www.gameplant1d.com or follow us on social media at Game Plan T1D. Find your game plan.